I'm so excited to film this today because these have always been some of my favorite videos to record, and I haven't made one in almost 2 years, so I'm very excited to finally do another Top of My TBR video. If you don't know what this is, Top of My TBR is a series that I created way back at the beginning of my channel, like January or February 2015. I'll even put the screenshot here to show you how long it's been. And this is a series where I basically just talk about the books that I'm most excited to read, the books that are at the top of my TBR. As I always say, this isn't necessarily exactly my TBR for the upcoming weeks and months, but it's just the books that are right now really piquing my interest, the ones that I'm really excited about, and that's why this is my favorite series to film, because I'm just talking about stuff I'm excited to read. And like I said, it's been like 2 years since I made one of these because I just haven't been reading avidly until fairly recently, so here we are. Very excited. Right now, as I'm filming this, my 30-day manga challenge is about to end, and while doing the challenge, I've been trying to only focus on reading manga and not distract myself with novels or anything else. And now that the challenge is ending, the whole wide world of books is opening up to me, and I've just got so many that I really want to read, and I'm going to talk about those today. I've got a list of about 20-ish books to talk about today, and they're divided up into like 3-ish sections. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the list. Okay, so this first section of the list is like the dark, maybe horror or paranormal stuff. And the first of those books is Another by Yukito Ayatsuji, as well as its corresponding manga adaptation. Just because I don't have to read only manga now doesn't mean I'm not still gonna be reading manga. This is a Japanese translation of a horror novel in which there's a class of students that is basically cursed. Supposedly there's like a vengeful spirit killing people in this class, but also there seems to be possibly a mystery element, like to get to the bottom of this curse, like is it even a real curse? Who knows? I recently read a manga series called Touhou Game, in which there's like a popularity contest in this one class of students and they start dying, and these two really remind me of each other, and I'm really hoping I enjoy this one a bit more because I thought Touhou Game was just alright, but maybe Another will be what I'm looking for from a premise like this. Next up is one that I do not yet own, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I've heard mixed things about this one. I feel like a lot of people mention it as a disappointing book, but also it has a high rating on Goodreads, so I'm not sure which one to trust. Either way, it takes place at a college, which is something I always really enjoy, and it also seems very like dark and like occult-y. It just seems very interesting, and it's one that really intrigues me, although it's probably not one of the ones I'm most excited about on this list. I don't know, it just seems very intriguing. Next up, heading straight back into the horror realm, is Parasite. A couple of years ago, one of my friends recommended the anime to me, and ever since then it's been on my radar as something I want to check out. Honestly, this is kind of one of those manga where I've heard nothing but good things about it, but I'm a little bit iffy on the premise because it sounds very like alien-y, and that's not always my favorite thing. It depends. But this is a very well-loved manga series and one that I'm very intrigued to check out. Now moving on to the second section of this list, which is probably also the biggest one, which is kind of like the mystery thriller section. Next up are 2 Marisha Pessl books, which are Special Topics in Calamity Physics and Neverworld Wake. Given my love of dark academia, this just sounds like everything I could ever want out of a novel. There's a mysterious death that happens at this like elite private boarding school, which just sounds super pretentious, which I love. It just gives me very much like If We Were Villains, like The Secret History vibes, and obviously those are 2 of my favorite books, so I'm very, very intrigued by this. Also, I loved Night Film, and I've heard that there are a lot of like pop culture references in here, which I always enjoy. And then from what I understand, this also deals with a death that happened at a boarding school, but it's actually following the characters like way after the events, and they're kind of trying to come to terms with it as they get back together for the first time. And then something happens to them and they get stuck in some sort of like endless loop called the Neverworld Wake. That part I'm a little bit more foggy on, but it sounds very intriguing nonetheless. And like I said, I liked Night Film and I'm intrigued by both of her other novels, so I hope that I really enjoy this. Next up, All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Urban. This is her debut novel that came out in early March, I believe, and it was my most anticipated release of the year apart from like sequels to series I'm reading. Basically, this has kind of been pitched as The Breakfast Club mixed with And Then There Were None, in which all of these students are invited to this scholarship dinner And once they get there, they find out that they've been invited there under false pretenses, and they actually have to choose one of them to die. But also, it gives me kind of vibes of like almost an escape room or like kind of a Saw situation. Either way, this is the type of book that either tends to be really, really good or really, really mediocre, but always really intrigues me based on the premise. So I'm hoping that it's very good, and I'm very intrigued to check it out. Next is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is the first book in a mystery series, which, like a lot of the other ones, centers around a death at a school. It actually kind of gives me Truly Devious vibes because it deals with the main character trying to solve this mystery as like a school project, which is basically Truly Devious. And obviously, I love Truly Devious, so I'm very intrigued by this one as well. I will just never get sick of murder mysteries set at a boarding school, and if that's redundant to you all, just blame If We Were Villains and The Secret History because they've absolutely ruined me. Speaking of murder mysteries set at a school, In the Hall with the Knife by Diana Peterfreund. Admittedly, I don't have super high hopes for this one because I think it's gonna be kind of tropey, but I think it's going to be fun nonetheless, and I'm very intrigued by it because it is my like favorite type of story. Also, it is like legitimately part of like the Clue franchise. Like the characters, I believe, are based on like the characters in Clue, even though it's obviously like students at a school. Also, did I mention that Clue is my favorite board game as a child, and Clue the movie is one of my favorite movies? I love stuff like this. So yeah, this one's probably gonna be super cheesy, but I might love it just because of that. I don't know. I'm really intrigued by it. The next one is one that I feel like I've heard about for ages, but I just recently heard the premise for the first time and was so intrigued by it, and that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Curtin. I just noticed this as I was looking at the back, but they even reference Agatha Christie on the back of this one. I really can't get away from her. I love everything Agatha Christie-esque. Basically, the premise of this is that Evelyn Hardcastle dies, and our main character is trying to solve the mystery of her death, figure out what happened. But he's reliving the same day over and over again until he can solve it, but each time he's thrust into a different person's body to do so, and it just sounds like so many interesting things. I'm very intrigued. It sounds very fresh and unique and twisty, and just everything sounds really, really intriguing, and I think this is one of the ones that's closest to the top of my TBR that I really want to read very soon. Next up, we have two more books that have been compared to Agatha Christie novels, and those are The Hunting Party and The Guest List by Lucy Foley. Once again, I feel like these are books that have been on my radar for a long time, but I didn't hear what the premise was until recently, and that was when I was like, oh, I need to read these. If I'm honest, I can't describe the premise of each of them individually to you because they just both give me very strong and then there were none vibes, and that's why I got so excited about them. Basically, in each of them, there's a cast of characters that are in a secluded location and someone dies, which means one of them did it. I just love stories like this. I'm sorry, I know they're so like cliche murder mystery whodunit stories, but I love them. Also, I totally forgot to add this to my Goodreads list that I'm looking off of for this video, but also An Unwanted Guest by Sherry LaPena, which I actually have, is another one of these. Specifically, this one I've heard very good things about, so this might be the first one I try, but I'm not totally sure. I'm just very intrigued by all of them. I love stories like this. Next up is to continue the monster manga series by Naoki Urasawa. This is a bind-up of the first 2 volumes, and I believe I've read the first 5 volumes, but it was back in like 2016. I picked this up because it was compared to Death Note, and I didn't get super into it when I read it, but my tastes have changed a little bit over the past few years, and I think it's one that I will really enjoy if I pick it up again now. I've mentioned a couple times that some of these are near the top of my list, but this next one is the one that is actually number 1 on my list. This is the one that I want to read as soon as my manga challenge is over, and that is The Crimson Labyrinth by Yusuke Kishi. Now that I think about it, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning with the horror novels, but whatever, we're here now. Firstly, the back says that this is for fans of Lost and Battle Royale, and although I haven't seen Lost, I've always wanted to, and I love Battle Royale. This kind of sounds like equal parts like dystopian, but also horror, and the back describes it as a satire on extremist reality TV. Basically, our main character is dropped in this labyrinth, and I guess he has to escape, or there's some sort of game happening within it. Basically, this just has a lot of elements that I really enjoy. I like competitions in stories, and I'm also very intrigued by the satire on reality TV. It just sounds very, very intriguing, and I want to pick this up up ASAP. Next up is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is another one where I heard people talking about it and hyping it up as like an upcoming release long before I actually heard what the premise was. And then once I heard the premise, I was like, why didn't I know that's what it was about? I need this immediately. Reading the premise to this almost feels like when I read the premise to a Murakami novel, in the sense that I have an idea of a lot of the elements and things that will be in this story, but I have no idea what the actual plot might be. Like, essentially this sounds like our main character discovers a book in a library that opens up a gate to a fantastical world, and that's about as much as I can understand about the story. Like, the premise mentions a lot of things about like balls and about specific characters and about like secret societies, but do I have any idea what the plot of this is or like what the story is going to be about? No, but I love the fact that it's giving me like the vibe of a Murakami premise, and the fact that I have no idea what the story is going to be about, but it sounds very mysterious and intriguing. I don't even know if this is a standalone or the first in a series. No idea. It just sounds kind of weird, and I'm very intrigued by that. Next up is the book. It is the one that I have mentioned so many times over the past like 2 years that is at the top of my TBR. It's one that I need to read very soon, and I still haven't read it, and that is Nice Try, Jane Sinner by Leigh Olke. In this story, our main character starts competing in this like Big Brother-esque game at her community college. On top of that, I read the first chapter of this for a Try a Chapter tag, and I loved the main character's voice. She has been described as a Slitherclaw, which is pretty accurate from what I read, and also I'm a Slitherclaw, so I just love that. Just with this book, the stars have aligned. Everything is in place for me to absolutely love this, and I just still haven't read this. Last book, and this one is like a huge shift in tone, and that is Your Name. This is the novelization of the movie of the same name. I believe that the person who wrote the movie also wrote this, so it's written by the same person. This deals with 2 characters, one of whom lives in Tokyo and one who lives in a small town, and the way that their lives intertwine despite, I think, never meeting in person. Or at the very least, their lives intertwine before they've met in person. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, this is one of the ones where I have like the vaguest idea of the premise, but also I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I should probably watch the movie before I read the book, but I don't know. Either way, it sounds like a nice change in tone as compared to everything else that I'm hoping to read soon, so that'll be really nice. So those are all the books on the top of my TBR, the books that I'm most intrigued by and interested in at this exact moment in time. Like I said, this isn't necessarily my TBR for the upcoming weeks and months. These are just the ones that are really intriguing me, but I can guarantee you that at least some of these will be the books that I read in the next few weeks and months. Either way, I'm just glad to be reading again and to find things that are really exciting me, and it's just a good time. I'm in a good place with reading, and I'm really enjoying that. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you think of them. I would love to know, especially since these are the ones I'm hopefully going to be reading soon. Also, if for some reason you're very intrigued to know what is piquing my interest in the interim between these videos, I do have a shelf on my Goodreads called Interest Peaked where I put all of these books, so you can check that out if you're curious. Speaking of Goodreads, links to all my social media are down in the description, including Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on there. I'd love to be friends with all of you on Goodreads. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.